When waitress Amelia signed to a deaf elderly customer, the distinguished man beside her broke down sobbing without warning. Her hands had unknowingly ripped open a family wound festering beneath decades of wealth and silence. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. A single gesture can sometimes bridge worlds that seem impossibly far apart. For Amelia Vaughn, a 26-year-old waitress working double shifts to pay for graduate school, that gesture was a simple greeting in sign language. For Eleanor Whitmore, an 82-year-old woman whose world had grown increasingly silent, it was an unexpected moment of connection. For Marcus Reed, a man whose $40 billion had insulated him from genuine human connection for decades, it was the crack that would finally shatter his carefully constructed walls. Le Chateau was the kind of restaurant where reservations were made months in advance, where politicians and celebrities dined beneath crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes. Amelia hadn't planned to work there. With a master's degree in linguistics nearly completed, and a specialization in sign language interpretation, serving foie gras to the ultra-wealthy hadn't been on her vision. But when her mother's Parkinson's had advanced more rapidly than expected, requiring specialized care that insurance wouldn't cover, Amelia had taken the highest-paying service job she could find. Table 12 needs their wine refreshed, Franco, the floor manager, whispered as he passed behind Amelia. And Mar Reed just arrived with his guest at table 16. VIP treatment. Amelia nodded, already moving toward the wine station. The name meant nothing to her, another wealthy patron in an endless parade of wealth. She'd gotten good at making herself invisible, at anticipating needs without being noticed. It was a skill that earned her substantial tips, but had begun to feel like a slow erosion of her personhood. The elderly woman at table 16 caught Amelia's attention immediately. Unlike the typical guests who frequented Le Chateau, there was nothing ostentatious about her. She wore a simple burgundy dress with a single strand of pearls, her silver hair elegantly styled. But it was her eyes that Amelia noticed, alert and intelligent, yet holding a profound loneliness that resonated with something deep within Amelia herself. The man across from her was different. His tailored suit probably cost more than Amelia's yearly tuition. His silver-streaked hair was perfectly cut, his posture radiating the unconscious confidence that came from never having to question one's place in the world. Marcus Reed, now she recognized him from countless business magazines and news segments. The tech billionaire who had transformed how the world communicated. Amelia approached with professional detachment. Good evening. Welcome to Le Chateau. May I start you with sparkling or still water this evening? The elderly woman looked up at her with an apologetic smile but didn't respond. The man Reed began to answer for her, but something in the woman's expression made Amelia pause. She recognized that particular quality of attention, the slight forward tilt of the head, focused gaze on Amelia's lips. Without thinking, Amelia's hands moved fluidly through the air. Would you prefer still or sparkling water? She signed, her movements elegant and precise. The transformation in the elderly woman's face was instantaneous. Surprise, followed by profound relief and joy. Her hands, slightly trembling with age, responded with grace. Still water, please. You signed beautifully. No one has spoken to me directly all evening. Amelia smiled, continuing to sign as she spoke aloud for Reed's benefit. Thank you. I'm happy to be able to communicate with you properly. My name's Amelia, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. The woman's hands moved again. I'm Eleanor. This is my son, Marcus. He's very important, but he never learned to sign properly, even though I've been deaf for 30 years. Amelia suppressed a smile, noticing how Marcus Reed's expression had shifted from distracted impatience to stunned silence. He was staring at their exchange with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. I'll be right back with your water, Amelia signed and spoke, moving away from the table with practiced efficiency. When she returned with the water, the atmosphere at the table had changed. Reed was sitting straighter, his eyes red-rimmed as though he was fighting back emotion. Eleanor was looking at him with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Are you ready to order, or would you like a few more minutes? Amelia asked and signed simultaneously. He's upset because he never sees me light up like this anymore. Eleanor signed without speaking, her movements small and private, directed only at Amelia. Since my husband died, I've been so isolated. Marcus tries, but he's always so busy. Tonight is the first time we've had dinner together in almost a year. Amelia nodded slightly, acknowledging Eleanor's words while maintaining her professional demeanor. The chef's tasting menu is exceptional tonight, she signed and spoke. 7 courses showcasing seasonal ingredients. Or I can tell you about our a la carte options. The tasting menu sounds lovely, Eleanor signed. Don't you think so, Marcus? Reed cleared his throat, clearly struggling to regain his composure. Yes, that would be fine. And a bottle of the Chateau Margaux 2010. As Amelia moved away to place their order, she felt Reed's eyes following her. Not in the way she was sometimes watched by wealthy men who saw service staff as another commodity to be consumed, but with a complex mixture of emotions she couldn't quite decipher. Throughout the meal, Amelia made sure to address Eleanor directly, signing each description of the elaborate dishes, translating her questions for the chef. With each course, Eleanor grew more animated, her hands dancing through stories of her life, how she'd lost her hearing gradually after a bout with meningitis in her 50s, how she'd been a concert pianist before, how music had been her life's passion. Marcus Reed barely touched his food. He watched the exchange between his mother and Amelia with an expression of increasing distress, occasionally wiping at his eyes when he thought no one was looking. By the fifth course, Amelia noticed his shoulders shaking slightly as he turned away, pressing a fine linen napkin. When she brought the dessert, an elaborate construction of chocolate and gold leaf, Eleanor reached out and touched Amelia's hand gently. "You've given me a great gift tonight," she signed, "to be seen and heard. My son has been trying to convince me to move into an assisted living facility. He worries about me being alone, but places like that, they don't have people who can communicate with me. I would be more isolated than ever." Amelia nodded sympathetically, unsure how to respond to such a personal confession. As she placed the dessert in front of Reed, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. On the table beside his hand lay a business card. It was turned toward her, clearly intended for her to see. "Reed Innovations," it read, with his name and title. But what caught her attention was the handwritten note on the back. "Please see me after dinner. I need to speak with you." Amelia felt a flutter of unease. In her experience, nothing good came from private conversations with powerful men after hours. But as she glanced from Reed to Eleanor, she saw something unexpected in his tear-streaked face. Not entitlement or desire, but a desperate, vulnerable hope. What Marcus Reed wanted from her, Amelia couldn't guess. But as she moved through the restaurant, attending to her other tables while keeping a watchful eye on table 16, she had the unsettling feeling that her life was about to change course in ways she couldn't possibly anticipate. The card seemed to burn in her apron pocket where she had discreetly placed it, a key to a door she wasn't sure she wanted to open. As the evening progressed, she found herself watching the unlikely pair, the billionaire and his deaf mother, with growing curiosity. There was a story there, buried beneath years of silence and wealth, and somehow, without intending to, Amelia had become part of it. The remainder of the service passed in a blur of polished silver and crystal. Amelia maintained her professional demeanor, but her mind kept returning to the business card tucked in her apron pocket. As she cleared the dessert plates, Eleanor reached for her hand once more. "Thank you for making me visible again," she signed, her weathered fingers moving with a poetic grace that transcended the clinical precision Amelia had learned in her textbooks. Amelia smiled, signing back, "It was my pleasure. I hope to see you again soon." Eleanor's eyes crinkled with warmth. "I hope so too, dear. More than you know." As the other patrons gradually departed, Amelia busied herself with closing duties, deliberately taking longer than necessary. When only a few tables remained occupied, Marcus Reed approached the service station where she was polishing glassware. Up close, the evidence of his emotional evening was more apparent. The slight redness around his eyes, the loosened tie, the uncharacteristic hesitancy in his posture. "Miss Vaughn?" he said, reading her nomatag. "I was hoping we could speak privately." Amelia nodded, gesturing toward a small alcove near the wine cellar. "I have a few minutes before I finish my shift." Once they were away from curious eyes, Reed's carefully constructed facade crumbled further. "I want to thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "What you did for my mother tonight. I haven't seen her that animated in years." "Your mother's a remarkable woman," Amelia replied, choosing her words carefully. "It was my pleasure to communicate with her properly." "That's just it," Reed said, running a hand through his perfectly groomed hair, disheveling it slightly. "Properly. I should be the one doing that. But I never learned beyond a few basic signs." He looked away, shame evident in the slump of his shoulders. "I always told myself I was too busy building the company. Too many demands on my time." Amelia remained silent, sensing there was more he needed to say. "My father learned," he continued. "After her diagnosis, he took classes, practiced every day. By the time her hearing was completely gone, they could communicate as easily as they always had. I told myself it wasn't necessary for me to do the same. We texted, used speech-to-text apps. Technology was my solution." He laughed bitterly. "Ironic, isn't it? I've made billions helping people communicate, yet I can't properly talk to my own mother." "It's never too late to learn," Amelia offered gently. Reed nodded, seeming to gather his resolve. "That's why I wanted to speak with you. I have a proposition. My mother mentioned you're studying linguistics, specializing in sign language interpretation." Amelia felt her guard rise. "Yes, I'm completing my master's degree. I'd like to hire you," Reed said direct, "as a private sign language instructor for both myself and as a companion interpreter for my mother." Amelia blinked, caught off guard. "Mr. Reed, I'm not." "The salary would be substantial," he continued. "Enough to cover your tuition, living expenses, and whatever care your mother needs for her Parkinson's." Amelia's breath caught. "Well, how did you make a few calls while you were serving other tables?" Reed admitted, having the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I wanted to know more about the woman who moved my mother to tears of joy." Under normal circumstances, Amelia would have been outraged at this invasion of privacy. But the mention of her mother's care, the crushing medical bills that kept her awake at night, gave her pause. "Miss Reed, While I appreciate the offer, I'm not sure it would be appropriate. I'm still completing my degree and I have commitments here at the restaurant. 3 months, Reed said, as if negotiating a business deal. That's how long my mother will be staying with me in the city before she returns to her home in Connecticut. 3 months of daily lessons for me and companionship for her when I'm working. You would have evenings free to attend your classes. I've already spoken to Franco. He's willing to hold your position here. Amelia felt a flicker of anger. You spoke to my manager before speaking to me. Reed had the decency to look chagrined. A presumptuous move, I admit. Old habits. He sighed, and for a moment the billionaire facade fell away completely, revealing just a man, middle-aged, tired, and regretful. My mother's all I have left, Miss Vaughn. After my father died, she retreated into herself. I tried to respect her independence, but I've failed her. Tonight was the first time I've seen a genuine smile from her in years. The naked vulnerability in his admission disarmed Amelia's rising indignation. Still, she hesitated. And what exactly would this position entail? You would live in the guest suite at my penthouse, Reed explained. Daily sign language instruction for me, morning and early afternoon. The rest of the day would be spent with my mother, accompanying her to appointments, museums, wherever she wishes to go. You would be her bridge to the world and mine to her. The offer was tempting, almost suspiciously so. And the compensation? $20,000 per month, Reed stated, plus a completion bonus that would cover the remainder of your education costs, and full medical coverage for both you and your mother, effective immediately. Amelia felt lightheaded. The amount was life-changing, enough to move her mother to a better care facility, enough to finish her degree without drowning in debt, enough to actually start her life instead of merely surviving. Why me? She asked, the question that had been nagging since he approached her. You could hire the most qualified ASL instructors in the country. Reed's expression softened. Because my mother connected with you, because you saw her as a person, not a disability, and because you have something most instructors don't, genuine empathy. I've built my career identifying talent, Miss Vaughn. You have it in abundance. Before Amelia could respond, Reed reached into his pocket and handed her a card, different from the one he'd left on the table. This is my private number. Think about it overnight. Call me tomorrow with your decision. As he turned to leave, he paused. One more thing, Miss Vaughn. My mother told me something as we were leaving. She said you were the first person in years who didn't make her feel broken. His voice cracked slightly. I would give anything to make her feel that way again. With that, he was gone, leaving Amelia standing in the alcove, the weight of decision heavy on her shoulders. Later that night in her cramped apartment, Amelia sat at the small table that served as both dining area and desk, Reed's card propped against a textbook. Her mother's medical bills were spread before her, a monthly reminder of her precarious financial situation. She picked up her phone and called the care facility where her mother resided. Hi, Sandra, she said when the night nurse answered. Is she still awake? Just barely, Sandra replied. Want me to put her on? A moment later, her mother's voice came through, fragile but determined. Amelia? Is everything all right, sweetheart? Everything's fine, Mom, Amelia said, trying to keep her voice steady. I might have an opportunity, a new job that could help with your treatment. What kind of job? Her mother asked, instantly alert despite the lateness of the hour. As Amelia explained Reed's offer, leaving out the emotional details, she could hear her mother's breathing on the other end of the line, the slight wheeze that had become more pronounced in recent months. It sounds too good to be true, her mother finally said, echoing Amelia's own doubts. That's what I thought too, Amelia admitted. But sometimes, Amelia, her mother said softly, life offers us a doorway when we least expect it. Your father used to say that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about being afraid and walking through the door anyway. The mention of her father, gone 5 years now, brought unexpected tears to Amelia's eyes. He had been her inspiration for studying languages. His work as a translator for the State Department opening her eyes to the power of communication across barriers. What would you do? Amelia asked. Her mother's laugh was gentle. I've never told you what to do, sweetheart. But I will say this. The opportunity to help someone reconnect with their parent, that seems like work worth doing. After they said their goodbyes, Amelia sat in the stillness of her apartment, Reed's card still staring up at her. Through her window, the city lights blurred as she considered the precipice before her, the familiar struggle of her current life against the uncertain promise of something new. With a deep breath, she picked up her phone again. The Reed penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a sleek glass tower that pierced the skyline like a crystalline spear. As the private elevator ascended silently, Amelia clutched her small suitcase, second-guessing her decision with every floor that disappeared beneath her. The 3-month contract sat in her bag, signed after a meeting with Reed's lawyers that morning. Everything had happened so quickly, a leave of absence from her studies arranged with surprising ease after the dean received a substantial donation in linguistics department, her shifts at Le Chateau redistributed, her meager belongings packed into 2 suitcases. The elevator doors opened directly into a foyer of gleaming marble and subdued lighting. Amelia stepped out, momentarily disoriented by the expansiveness of the space that unfolded before her. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a panoramic view of the city that made her breath catch. The urban landscape spread out like a glittering circuit board, beautiful and remote. Ms. Vaughn. Marcus Reed emerged from a doorway, dressed more casually than she had seen him at the restaurant, though his idea of casual still involved a tailored shirt and expensive slacks. Welcome. I hope the arrangements were satisfactory. Yes, thank you, Amelia said, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. Everything happened very efficiently. A ghost of a smile touched Reed's lips. Efficiency is something of a specialty. He gestured toward her suitcase. Carlos will take your belongings to the guest suite. My mother is eager to see you. As if on cue, a uniformed staff member appeared, taking Amelia's suitcase with a polite nod. Reed led her through the penthouse, a carefully curated showcase of understated wealth. The art on the walls wasn't showy but revealed an educated eye. The furniture was modern but inviting. The technology that undoubtedly filled the space was discreetly integrated, invisible until needed. They found Eleanor in a sun-drenched sitting room, a book open on her lap. She looked up as they entered, and her face transformed with delight when she saw Amelia. She set aside her book and immediately began to sign. You came? I was afraid Marcus had scared you away with his intensity. He always was an overwhelming child. Amelia smiled, signing back. Good afternoon, Mrs. Whitmore. It's lovely to see you again. Eleanor, please, she corrected, her signs flowing with the natural rhythm of someone who had been using the language for decades. Mrs. Whitmore makes me feel like my mother-in-law. Terrible woman. She never believed I was good enough for her son. Behind Amelia, Marcus cleared his throat. I'm going to assume she's saying something inappropriate about me, he said dryly. Amelia glanced back at him. Actually, she was talking about your grandmother. Eleanor chuckled silently, her eyes twinkling with mischief. He always assumes everything is about him. The hazard of being important, I suppose. She patted the sofa beside her. Sit, dear. Tell me how this arrangement came to be. Marcus was very mysterious about it all. Amelia sat, aware of Marcus watching their exchange with a mixture of curiosity and something that might have been envy. She explained briefly about her studies, her mother's condition, and the opportunity Reed's offer presented. So my son's money solved everything? Eleanor signed, her expression growing more serious. He believes that's all he has to offer, you know, solutions that can be purchased. Mother, Marcus interrupted, recognizing his name in her signing. Please don't start psychoanalyzing me in front of Ms. Vaughn. She's only just arrived. Eleanor raised an eyebrow at him, then turned back to Amelia. He doesn't know what I'm saying, but he always assumes the worst. I should learn some basic signs right away, Marcus said, as if reading his mother's thoughts. Perhaps we could begin this afternoon? Of course, Amelia replied, shifting smoothly into the role she had agreed to. But first, it might be helpful for me to understand your current communication system. A shadow passed over Marcus's face. We text, he said simply. Or I speak and she reads lips. Sometimes we use an app that transcribes my words. The clinical description of their interaction hung in the air, highlighting all it lacked, the nuance, the connection, the shared language that had once existed between Eleanor and her husband. Marcus has always believed technology can solve every problem. Eleanor signed, her expression softening with maternal affection despite her critique. Even when his father and I tried to tell him that some problems aren't meant to be solved, only lived with and understood. Amelia hesitated before translating this, aware of the delicate balance she would need to maintain between honest communication and diplomacy. But before she could speak, Marcus's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. I need to take this, he said, already moving toward the door. A situation in our Singapore office. Please make yourself comfortable. We'll begin lessons when I return. As he left, Eleanor shook her head, signing with a resigned familiarity. Some things never change. It's always an emergency somewhere. Alone with Eleanor, Amelia felt the weight of expectation lift slightly. He seems very committed to learning, she offered. Oh, Marcus commits to everything with absolute intensity. Eleanor signed, her movements becoming more expansive and natural now that they were alone. Whether it's building his empire or learning sign language, the question is never his dedication, it's his ability to see beyond the task to the meaning behind it. Amelia nodded, understanding beginning to dawn. You mean he focuses on the mechanics rather than the connection? Precisely, Eleanor signed, looking pleased. You're perceptive, dear. Marcus sees sign language as a problem to solve, not a bridge to build. When John, my husband, learned to sign, he made it a dance between us. We laughed at his mistakes, created our own private signs. It was intimate, joyful, her hands slowed, nostalgia softening her features. I fear Marcus will approach it like programming code, something to be mastered rather than felt. Perhaps that will change, Amelia suggested. Sometimes the process transforms the learner. Eleanor studied her thoughtfully. You're not what I expected, Amelia. When Marcus told me he had hired someone, I imagined an efficient instructor who would drill him on vocabulary. But you're something else entirely, aren't you? Question caught Amelia off guard. I'm not sure what you mean. You see people, Eleanor signed simply, not just their words or their needs, but their hearts. It's a rare gift. She reached for Amelia's hand, squeezing it gently. And it's exactly what my son, though he doesn't know it yet. The moment was interrupted by Carlos appearing at the doorway. Miss Vaughn, if you're ready, I can show you to your suite so you can settle in before dinner. Amelia followed Carlos through the penthouse to a guest suite that was larger than her entire apartment. The space was elegant but comfortable, with its own sitting area, a luxurious bathroom, and a bedroom with yet another breathtaking view of the city. Her suitcases had been placed neatly by a walk-in closet that could have housed her entire wardrobe several times over. Laura, Reed requested that these be delivered for you, Carlos said, indicating a stack of books on the desk. the latest texts on sign language instruction, linguistics journals, and educational materials. Beside them sat a sleek laptop and tablet, still in their boxes. He thought they might be useful for your work. After Carlos left, Amelia sat on the edge of the bed, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. 24 hours earlier, she had been serving wine to strangers, worrying about making rent. Now she was living in a penthouse, employed by one of the wealthiest men in the country, tasked not just with teaching him a language, but with helping him reconnect with his mother. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Settled in? Is it as intimidating as you imagined?" Amelia smiled, typing back. "More so. The guest room is bigger than our old house. I'm not sure I belong here." Her mother's response came quickly. "You belong wherever your skills and heart are needed. From what you've told me, both are needed there." Amelia gazed out at the city below, the lives playing out in countless windows across the urban expanse. Somewhere in that maze of light and shadow was her old apartment, her previous life, for better or worse. She had stepped through a doorway into something new, a 3-month interlude that promised to change everything, though in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The first sign language lesson began the next morning in Marcus's home office. A minimalist space of glass and brushed steel that overlooked the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. Unlike the rest of the penthouse, which bore subtle touches of warmth and personality, this room was purely functional, a command center for a digital empire. "I've cleared my schedule until noon," Marcus said, gesturing for Amelia to take a seat at a sleek conference table where he had already arranged notebooks and tablets. "I'm told I'm a quick study." Amelia smiled diplomatically. "Sign language isn't like learning coding or business strategy, mister. It's not just about memorization or pattern recognition. It's about expression, connection." "Marcus, please," he corrected, settling into a chair across from him. "And I understand that. But surely there's a systematic approach we can take to accelerate the learning process." "There is," Amelia conceded, "but it's important to set realistic expectations. Fluency takes years, not weeks. Our goal for these 3 months isn't perfection, it's functional communication with your mother." Something flickered across Marcus's face. Disappointment, perhaps? Or the unfamiliar sting of limitation. For a man accustomed to bending reality to his will through sheer determination and resources, the organic, time-dependent nature of language acquisition represented a rare, immovable obstacle. "I see," he said finally. "Then let's focus on efficiency. What's the fastest path to meaningful conversation with my mother?" Amelia considered this. "We'll start with a core vocabulary centered around your shared experiences and interests. What do you and your mother typically discuss when you're together?" The question seemed to catch Marcus off guard. He stared at her blankly for a moment before answering. "Business updates, I suppose. Her health, household arrangements. And before her hearing loss? What did you talk about then?" Marcus looked away, his gaze drifting to the city below. "Music. She was a pianist, did she tell you? She taught at Juilliard for 20 years. We used to discuss compositions, techniques, single quotes." His voice softened with the memory. "My father was tone deaf, but he loved watching her play. I inherited some of her talent, but lacked the patience for practice." Amelia noted the unguarded moment, a rare glimpse behind the executive facade. "Then music is where we'll begin. The signs for musical terms, expressions of preference, questions about compositions, a vocabulary that connects to your shared history." For the next 2 hours, Amelia guided Marcus through basic greeting, question formats, and music-related signs. Despite his initial impatience, he proved to be an attentive student, repeating each sign until his execution was precise. What he lacked in expressiveness, he compensated for with technical accuracy, his hands forming each sign with mathematical exactitude, if not natural grace. "You're doing well," Amelia encouraged as they reached the end of the session. "But try to think of signing as a fluid conversation, not a series of discrete gestures. Watch how your mother signs. There's a musicality to it, a rhythm." Marcus flexed his fingers, frustration evident in the tightness of his jaw. "It doesn't feel natural." "It won't. Not at first," Amelia assured him. "Language lives in the body as much as the mind. Your muscles need to develop memory. Your brain needs to create new pathways. Time," Marcus said with a hint of bitterness. "The one resource I can't simply acquire more of." The comment revealed more than perhaps he intended, a fundamental limitation that all his wealth and influence couldn't overcome. Time was the great equalizer, the one currency that flowed at the same rate for billionaires and waitresses alike. Their lesson was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Eleanor entered, her eyes moving between them with curious interest. "How's the student progressing?" she signed to Amelia. "He's dedicated and precise," Amelia signed back, choosing her words carefully. Marcus watched their exchange with focused attention, clearly trying to decipher the movements. "What did she ask?" "She wanted to know how you're doing," Amelia translated. "I told her you're a committed student." Marcus straightened, then carefully formed the signs they had practiced. "Good morning, mother." "I am learning." Eleanor's face brightened with surprised delight. The simple sentence, clumsily executed but earnestly offered, seemed to affect her more deeply than any technologically facilitated communication had in years. She responded with slow, deliberate signs that Amelia had taught Marcus earlier. "I am proud of you." The exchange was brief and elementary, but the impact was profound. Something shifted in the atmosphere between mother and son, a small bridge forming across a chasm that had widened over decades of silence. "I have tickets for the symphony tonight," Eleanor signed to Amelia. "The Philharmonic is performing Rachmaninoff. Would you accompany me?" Marcus is always too busy. Before Amelia could respond, Marcus interrupted. "What is she saying now?" "She's mentioning symphony tickets for tonight," Amelia explained. "Rachmaninoff. She was asking if I would accompany her." Marcus frowned, a strange conflict playing across his features. "The Rachmaninoff at Lincoln Center? I was planning to attend that myself, actually. It's the piano concerto, no point two. It was always her favorite to play." Eleanor's eyebrows rose in surprise as Amelia translated his words. "You were going to the symphony? Without telling me?" Eleanor signed, her movements sharp with hurt and confusion. "I was going to invite you," Marcus said after Amelia translated. "It was meant to be a surprise." Eleanor studied her son's face, decades of maternal insight reading beyond his words. "You never liked Rachmaninoff," she signed skeptically. "You always preferred batch structure over sentiment," you said. When Amelia translated this, Marcus had the grace to look slightly abashed. "I've developed a greater appreciation for emotional complexity with age," he said, the corporate smoothness returning to his voice. Eleanor gave a silent laugh, her shoulders shaking slightly. "He's lying," she signed to Amelia, "but it's a kind lie. He's trying." The moment was interrupted by Marcus's phone vibrating on the table. He glanced at it, and Amelia saw the brief war of priorities play out on his face before he deliberately turned the phone face down. "We'll all go together," he said, the decision clearly made in that moment. "I'll have Genevieve clear my evening calendar." After Eleanor left to rest before lunch, Marcus remained in his chair, staring at the elementary sign language guide they had been using. "She didn't believe I was planning to go to the symphony," he said quietly. "You don't seem like a regular patron of the arts," Amelia observed. "I'm not," he admitted, "but I've been going to hear Rachmaninoff's Second whenever it's performed for years." Sitting in the back, leaving before the lights come up, he looked up at Amelia, and for a brief moment she saw not the Billionaire but the sun. It was her piece, the one she played the night my father proposed to her, the last one she performed publicly after her hearing began to fade. He flexed his fingers absently, as if feeling phantom piano keys. "I go to remember what we lost." The confession hung in the air between them, a rare moment of unguarded honesty that revealed the complicated grief beneath his driven exterior. It wasn't just his mother's hearing that had been lost, but a shared language of music that had once bound their family together. "Perhaps tonight you can begin to find a new connection," Amelia suggested gently, "not through sound, but through presence." Marcus nodded, the vulnerability already receding behind his customary reserve. "We should continue. I want to learn enough to tell her about the program myself." As they resumed the lesson, Amelia sensed a subtle shift in Marcus's approach, less mechanical precision, more attention to the communicative intent behind each sign. It was a small change, barely perceptible, but it carried the seed of transformation. For perhaps the first time in decades, Marcus Reed was learning something not to master it, but to use it as a bridge to someone he loved. Lincoln Center glowed like a beacon in the evening darkness, its iconic fountain dancing with light and water. Amelia stepped from the sleek town car, wearing a simple black dress that Eleanor had insisted on having delivered to the penthouse that afternoon. "You can't attend the Philharmonic in off-the-rack department store clothes," Eleanor had signed with good-natured firmness. The dress fit perfectly, making Amelia wonder what else Marcus's team had discovered about her during their background research. Eleanor emerged next, elegant in a deep burgundy ensemble that spoke of decades of refined taste. Marcus followed, his customary business attire replaced by an impeccably tailored tuxedo. Standing between mother and son, Amelia felt the curious glances of other attendees, wondering, no doubt, who this young woman was and how she fit into the well-known Reed family narrative. As they approached the entrance, a distinguished older man detached himself from a conversational group to intercept them. "Marcus, what a pleasant surprise. I don't believe I've seen you at a performance in years." His eyes moved curiously to Eleanor and Amelia. "Lawrence," Marcus acknowledged with a cordial nod. "You remember my mother, of course." "Eleanor." The man's face lit up as he took her hand, radiant as ever. "We've missed you terribly at the board meetings." He began speaking more slowly, over-enunciating each word, as people often did when they realized someone was deaf. Amelia watched Eleanor's face remain pleasantly neutral, though her eyes registered the familiar disappointment of being spoken to as if diminished. Without thinking, Amelia stepped slightly forward and began to sign, slating Lawrence's words naturally while speaking her response aloud. "Eleanor says she misses the board as well, but has been enjoying her time in Connecticut. She asks about your wife's recent exhibition." Lawrence blinked in surprise, then broke into a warm smile. "Please tell her it was a tremendous success. Margaret would be delighted to know Eleanor remembers." As Amelia continued facilitating the conversation, she became aware of Marcus watching the exchange with an intensity that bordered on revelation. He observed the subtle transformation in his mother as she engaged in full, nuanced communication through Amelia's interpretation, her posture straightening, her expressions animated, her hands moving with the eloquence that had once characterized her piano playing. When they finally moved away toward their seats, Marcus leaned close to Amelia. "I've never seen her like that at these events." he said quietly. Usually she just smiles and nods. Most people don't know how to engage with deaf individuals, Amelia explained. They either avoid conversation entirely or simplify everything to the point of condescension, like I've been doing, Marcus acknowledged, the realization evident in his voice. Inside the concert hall, they were seated in a private box with an unobstructed view of the stage. As the lights dimmed and the orchestra began to tune, Amelia noticed Eleanor's hand drift to the armrest, her fingers moving slightly in what appeared to be unconscious muscle memory, playing along to music she could now only feel as vibration. What is the program explaining about the piece? Eleanor signed to Amelia, gesturing toward the playbill. Amelia began to translate the notes on Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto, but was surprised when Marcus interrupted, attempting to sign some of the information himself. His movements were stiff and imperfect, but his effort was unmistakable. He had clearly been practicing beyond their morning lesson. Composed after ... Depression, he signed haltingly, supplementing with speech that Eleanor could partially read on his lips. Return to music. After silence. The parallel to their own situation, a reconnection after years of communicative silence, wasn't lost on any. Eleanor's eyes glistened as she reached out to touch her son's hand, a simple gesture that conveyed decades of maternal love and newly awakened hope. As the performance began, Amelia observed both reeds carefully. Eleanor closed her eyes at times, her body subtly responding to vibrations she could feel through the floor and air. Marcus watched his mother as much as the orchestra, witnessing her experience the music in a way he had never fully understood before. During intermission, they remained in their box while the crowds dispersed to the lobby. Eleanor turned to her son with animated hands. "You used to hate this piece," she signed, her expression teasing. "You said it was too romantic, too excessive." Marcus smiled ruefully as Amelia translated. "I was 17 and thought I knew everything. I believed emotion was weakness. And now?" Eleanor asked through Amelia. Marcus hesitated, then attempted to sign himself. "Now I understand ... necessary." A simple exchange, but profound in its implication. Amelia felt like a witness to something sacred, the beginning of a reconciliation that had been decades in the making. When they returned to the penthouse later that evening, Eleanor excused herself, the exertion of the evening having tired her. As she bid them goodnight, she signed something to Amelia that she deliberately didn't translate for Marcus, a private observation that made Amelia blush slightly. "He looks at you the way his father first looked at me, like a puzzle he can't solve but desperately wants to understand." After Eleanor retired, Marcus invited Amelia to join him for a nightcap in the penthouse's library, a wood-paneled sanctuary filled with first editions and leather-bound volumes that seemed at odds with his tech mogul image. "This was my father's room," he explained, pouring a small measure of amber liquid into crystal glasses. "The only space in the penthouse I left untouched after his death." Amelia accepted the glass but didn't drink. "Your parents seem to have had a remarkable relationship." "They did," Marcus confirmed, settling into a worn leather chair that had clearly been his father's favorite. Even after her hearing loss, they remained ... connected. "My father learned sign language within 6 months, became almost as fluent as she was." He twirled the liquid in his glass, watching the light catch its facets. "I told myself I was too busy, that texting and technology were adequate substitutes for real communication." "Why did you really start attending the Rachmaninoff performances?" Amelia asked. Marcus looked up, surprised by the directness of her question. For a moment she thought he might deflect or retreat behind his customary reserve. Instead, he set his glass down and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "After my father died, I found his calendar. Every year on the anniversary of their first date, he took her to hear the second concerto. Even after her hearing was gone, they maintained the tradition." His voice grew quieter. "The first anniversary after his death, I went in his place. I sat in the back and I watched her attend alone, sitting in their usual seats. She didn't know I was there." "And you've gone every year since?" "Every performance in the city," Marcus confirmed. "Always sitting where she couldn't see me, watching her experience it without him." He gave a humorless laugh. "Pathetic, isn't it? A grown man, too afraid to sit beside his own mother." "I don't think it's pathetic," Amelia said gently. "I think it's someone who didn't know how to cross a divide, but never stopped wanting." The silence that followed was comfortable, thoughtful, two people from vastly different worlds finding unexpected common ground in the universal language of family and loss. "You're very good at what you do," Marcus finally said, changing the subject. "Not just the sign language, but the ... understanding. The mediation. It's not just a job for me," Amelia explained. "When my mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's, I watched how people began to interact with her differently, talking around her instead of to her, making assumptions about her cognitive abilities based on her physical symptoms. It taught me how critical it is to maintain the dignity of direct communication." Marcus studied her with newfound respect. "You know, when I made the offer to hire you, it was largely selfish, a way to ease my guilt, to buy a solution to a problem I'd ignored for too long. But I think ... single quotes." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. I think you may be giving us something I couldn't have anticipated. What's that? A second chance, he said simply. In the weeks that followed, a rhythm developed in the penthouse. Mornings dedicated to Marcus's lessons. Afternoons spent accompanying Eleanor on various outings. Evenings often shared in the comfortable quiet of the library. The dynamic between them shifted subtly but significantly, professional boundaries softening into something more complex. Marcus proved to be a diligent student, his progress accelerated by his determination and the hours he spent practicing alone late into the night. Amelia would occasionally catch him signing to himself while reviewing business documents, his hands moving through vocabulary drills even as his eyes scanned quarterly reports. Eleanor flourished under Amelia's companionship. They visited museums, attended lectures, and spent hours in conversation that ranged from music theory to philosophy to the simple joys of daily life. For a woman who had gradually withdrawn from society as her deafness deepened, this reemergence was like watching a flower unfurl after a long winter. I'd forgotten what it was like. Eleanor signed one afternoon as they sat in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, resting between galleries, to move through the world without explanation or apology, to simply be. Has it always been difficult? Amelia asked. Since your hearing loss? Eleanor's hands were contemplative in their movement. Not with John. He made sure I was never isolated, never diminished. But after he died, ... single quotes. She paused, her gaze drifting to a nearby sculpture. The world becomes very small when you can't hear it and others can't or won't, signed you. The pointed reference to her son wasn't lost on Amelia. Marcus is trying now. Yes, Eleanor acknowledged, her expression softening, but I wonder if it's too late. Too much has been lost in the silence. That evening, Amelia found Marcus in the library earlier than usual, nursing a scotch and staring out at the city lights. His tie was loosened, his usual pristine appearance slightly rumpled, signs of a difficult day. Rough board meeting? She ventured, having overheard his video conference earlier. Investor concerns about our new privacy protocol, he replied, setting down his glass. They're worried about quarterly profits. I'm worried about ethical implications. He shook his head slightly. The irony is that I built a company around communication technology, yet failed at the most basic human communication in my own life. It's not too late to change that, Amelia said, echoing her earlier words to Eleanor. Marcus turned to face her. My mother doesn't think so. I saw you two talking at the museum today. I've learned enough sign to recognize when my name comes up, even from across a room. Amelia hesitated, caught between her role as Eleanor's confidant and Marcus's instructor. She's cautiously hopeful, she said carefully, but also realistic about how much time has passed. 23 years. Marcus said quietly. That's how long it's been since her hearing loss became profound. 23 years of texts and emails and awkward lip. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of discomposure. Do you know what she told me when I was 18? Before I left for college, she said, never let technology replace humanity. Prescient advice from the mother of a future tech mogul, Amelia observed. She knew me better than I knew myself, Marcus admitted. I've spent my adult life creating digital bridges while ignoring the human chasms right in front of me. He picked up his glass again but didn't drink. How's your mother doing? The sudden change of subject caught Amelia off guard. Better, actually. The new care facility has a specialized Parkinson's program. Her tremors are more managed and she's sleeping better. I'm glad, Marcus said sincerely. I had my foundation's medical research team send over some information on experimental treatments. There's a new therapy being developed at Johns Hopkins that's showing promise. Amelia stared at it, surprised by the thoughtful gesture. You didn't have to do that. No, he agreed. But I wanted to. Single quotes, his eyes met hers with an intensity that made her heart quicken unexpectedly. You've given my mother her voice back. You're giving me a chance to hear it again. That deserves more than just financial compensation. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither was prepared to name. Amelia was the first to look away, acutely aware of the dangerous territory they were approaching. We should focus on expanding your medical vocabulary, she said, returning to safer ground. Tomorrow's hospital charity event will have many terms you haven't learned yet. Marcus accepted the professional redirect with a slight nod, but something had shifted between them. A door opened that couldn't easily be closed again. The Mount Sinai Hospital Gala was one of the city's premier charity events, drawing the elite of medicine, business, and philanthropy. The Reed Foundation had been a major donor for years, funding a state-of-the-art neurological research center. This year's event held special significance. The dedication of a new pediatric wing that bore the Reed name. As their car approached the venue, Amelia felt Eleanor's hand clasp hers nervously. There will be speeches, she signed. There are always speeches that I can't follow. I'll interpret everything, Amelia reassured her. And Marcus has been practicing his remarks in sign as well as speech. Eleanor's eyebrows rose in surprise. He didn't tell me he was speaking. It was supposed to be a surprise, Amelia. He's been practicing for weeks. The gala was a glittering affair. Women in designer gowns, men in tuxedos, conversations flowing as freely as the champagne. As they made their entrance, Amelia was conscious of the curious glances directed their way. By now, rumors had circulated about the young woman constantly at Eleanor Reed's side, facilitating her re-emergence into society after years of reclusion. What few people realized, however, was how significantly Marcus had changed as well. Where once he would have worked the room with strategic precision, he now stayed close to his mother. watching Amelia sign the conversations around them, occasionally attempting to join in with his own increasingly confident signs. When the time came for the dedication ceremony, Marcus approached the podium with his customary authority, but as he began to speak, something unprecedented happened. His hands began to move in tandem with his words, signing the key points of his address. "Tonight we dedicate this wing not just to advancing medicine," he said and signed, his movements still mechanical but intelligible, "but to honoring the human connections that give healing its purpose." From her seat in the front row, Eleanor watched her son with tears streaming silently down her face, witnessing for the first time in decades her son speaking to her directly, in her language, in public. "My mother taught me," Marcus continued, his voice steady even as his hands sometimes hesitated, "that true communication transcends technology. That wisdom has taken me far too long to truly understand." As he spoke the final words of his dedication, Marcus looked directly at Eleanor and signed with careful precision, "I am listening now." The applause was thunderous, the crowd moved by the personal dimension of what had seemed like a routine dedication, but few understood the true significance of the moment. A son breaking through decades of silence to reach his mother in a language she had thought he would never learn. After the ceremony, as the gala continued around them, Marcus found Amelia standing alone near one of the large windows overlooking the city. "Your signing was excellent," she said. "You've been practicing more than just during our sessions." "Every night after you and my mother go to bed," he confirmed. "I wanted to get it right." "You did." She was deeply moved. Marcus's expression was uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Did I say what I think I said? Sometimes the nuances still escape me." "You told her you were listening now," Amelia confirmed. "And she heard you." Marcus nodded, satisfaction and something deeper lighting his eyes. "Thank you." It was a simple expression of gratitude, but the weight behind it was anything but simple. In that moment, Amelia realized with sudden clarity that her role in the Reed household had become far more complicated than the job description in her contract. She was no longer just an interpreter or instructor. She had become a catalyst for healing, a bridge not just between languages, but between hearts long disconnected. And as Marcus was called away by hospital administrators eager to discuss future donations, Amelia found herself watching him with the unsettling awareness that her own heart was now treacherously involved in a situation with a definitive 3-month expiration date. The morning after the gala, Amelia woke to a text from her mother, saw Marcus Reed's speech on the news. They showed him signing. "Is that your doing?" Amelia smiled, typing back, "He's a surprisingly dedicated student when he sets his mind to something." "And how's the student-teacher relationship?" "Still strictly professional." The question made Amelia pause. Her mother had always been perceptive, reading between the lines of their conversations with uncanny accuracy. "It's complicated," she finally replied, unwilling to examine her feelings more deeply even in the privacy of her thoughts. Her mother's response was immediate. "Complicated usually means yes, but I'm afraid to admit it." Amelia set her phone down without answering, the truth of the observation too uncomfortable to acknowledge. She had 7 weeks remaining in her contract. 7 weeks before she returned to her real life, her studies, her modest apartment. Developing feelings for Marcus Reed wasn't just unprofessional, it was impractical to the point of absurdity. When she emerged from her suite, she found Eleanor in the kitchen, a rare sight. The older woman was attempting to prepare tea, her movements slow but determined. "Good morning," Amelia signed, moving to help. "I can manage," Eleanor signed back with gentle firmness. "I've been allowing others to do too much for me these past years." She successfully filled the kettle and set it on the stove. "Dependence becomes a habit if you're not careful." The observation carried weight beyond the immediate context. As Eleanor arranged delicate porcelain cups on a tray, she signed, "I saw you watching my son last night." Amelia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He did very well with his signing." That's not what I meant," Eleanor replied, her eyes knowing. "You're falling for him." The directness was startling but typical of Eleanor, who had never developed the habit of social dissembling that hearing people often use to soften uncomfortable truths. "That would be inappropriate," Amelia signed, her movements clipped and formal. "I'm an employee. Labels," Eleanor dismissed with a wave of her hand. "Life is too short for such distinction. I watched my husband die after 46. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that connections of the heart are rare and should never be dismissed over something as trivial as circumstance." Before Amelia could formulate a response, Marcus appeared in the doorway, dressed more casually than usual in a simple button-down and slacks. He looked between them, clearly aware he had interrupted something. "Good morning," he signed, his movements becoming more natural with each passing day. "Am I interrupting?" "Yes," Eleanor signed bluntly, causing Marcus to raise his eyebrows in surprise. "But it's fine. We were just discussing matters of the heart." Marcus looked to Amelia for clarification, but she merely shook her head, unwilling to translate that particular exchange. "Mother was making tea," she explained verbally, grateful that her voice betrayed none of her inner turmoil. A rare sight, Marcus commented, moving further into the kitchen. Usually Carlos handles this. I'm reclaiming some independence, Eleanor signed as Amelia translated. I've allowed myself to become too passive. It's time I started doing things for myself again. Marcus watched his mother with an expression that mingled pride and concern. Is this my fault? He signed and spoke simultaneously, his progress allowing for more direct communication. Have I been overprotective? Eleanor considered this, her hands still for a moment before responding. We both retreated after your father died. You into work, me into silence. It was easier than facing the empty space he left between us. The raw honesty of her statement hung in the air. For all the progress they had made, this was the first time either had directly addressed the emotional distance that had developed after John Reed's death. I didn't know how to reach you, Marcus admitted, signing without speaking this time, making the exchange more intimate, without him to bridge the gap. And I didn't make it easy, Eleanor acknowledged. Grief made me bitter. I resented that you could still hear the world I'd lost. Amelia stood motionless, feeling like an intruder in this long overdue conversation. She began to step away, but Eleanor caught her arm. Stay, she signed. You're part of this now, part of us. The simple declaration sent a complicated wave of emotions through Amelia: gratification, unease, and a bittersweet awareness that this sense of belonging was temporary by design. The kettle whistled, breaking the moment. As Eleanor prepared the tea with methodical grace, Marcus moved closer to Amelia. Thank you, he said quietly, for making this possible. You did the work, Amelia replied, equally soft. I just provided the tools. No. Marcus shook his head. It's more than that. You brought ... humanity back into this house. I'd forgotten what that felt like. The admission, simple yet profound, caught Amelia off guard. In any other context, with any other employer, the boundaries would have been clear. But here, in this strange interlude between three people finding their way back to connection, nothing was as straightforward as it should have been. Later that day, after Marcus had left for a meeting and Eleanor was resting, Amelia received an unexpected call from her mother's care facility. Ms. Vaughn, this is Dr. Carlin. I wanted to let you know that we've reviewed your mother's case, and we believe she would be an excellent candidate for the experimental treatment protocol that was sent over by the Reed Foundation. Amelia sat down abruptly. I'm sorry, what protocol? A new approach to neural stimulation that's showing remarkable results in tremor reduction? It's quite cutting edge. Normally the waiting list would be years long, but the Reed Foundation specifically recommended your mother for immediate inclusion. Marcus had done more than simply pass along information. He had used his influence to give her mother access to treatment that might significantly improve her quality of life. The gesture was overwhelming in its thoughtfulness and in the resources it represented, a casual deployment of connections and influence that would have been unthinkable in Amelia's world. That evening, when Marcus returned, Amelia was waiting in the library. He entered, loosening his tie with a weary gesture that spoke of a challenging day. You've got my mother into the Johns Hopkins program, she said without preamble. Marcus paused, then nodded. It seemed the right thing to do. It was presumptuous, Amelia countered, though without real anger. You should have discussed it with me first. Would you have accepted if I had? He asked perceptively. Amelia hesitated. Probably not. Then I stand by my decision. He moved to the bar cart, pouring himself a scotch. I have resources, Amelia. What good are they if I can't use them to help the people who matter? The implications of that statement, that she mattered to him, hung in the air between them. Amelia found herself at a crossroads, aware that her next words would either reinforce professional boundaries or acknowledge the shifting nature of their relationship. Thank you, she said finally, choosing the simpler path. My mother's tremors have been getting worse. This could make a real difference for her. Marcus nodded, accepting her gratitude without pressing for more. How's your thesis coming along? You mentioned you were falling behind due to work commitments. The consideration behind the question, remembering a detail she'd mentioned weeks ago, touched her unexpectedly. Slowly, I still have research to complete on sign language acquisition in late-stage language learners. A slight smile played at the corners of his mouth. You have a case study right in front of you. I've been taking notes, Amelia admitted. Your progress is remarkable, especially your ability to incorporate emotional nuance rather than just technical accuracy. Most adult learners struggle with that aspect. I have a good teacher, he said simply, and a powerful motivation. As he spoke, his eyes held hers with an intensity that made it impossible to maintain the fiction that this was still just a professional exchange. Something was happening between them, something neither had anticipated and neither seemed prepared to name. The moment was interrupted by Eleanor appearing in the doorway, her expression troubled. What's wrong? Marcus signed immediately, his concern evident. My brother called. Eleanor signed, her hands trembling slightly. David is in the hospital. Heart attack. They don't know if he'll make it through the night. Pittsburgh, Eleanor signed, her movements sharp with anxiety. David lives in Pittsburgh. I need to go to him. Marcus was already in motion, phone in hand. I'll have the jet prepared, he said, signing simultaneously. We can be there in an hour. Eleanor nodded, her face etched with worry. He's my only sibling, my last connection to the world before all of this. She gestured vaguely to her ears, to the silence that had defined the latter half of her life. I'll help you pack, Amelia offered, moving toward Eleanor with gentle assurance. You're coming too, Eleanor signed firmly. I'll need you there. The hospital, the doctors, ... single quotes. Amelia glanced at Marcus, who nodded without hesitation. Of course she's coming. We'll all go. Within 40 minutes they were in a sleek black SUV headed toward the private airfield. Eleanor sat quietly, her hands occasionally forming fragmented signs, half-formed thoughts betraying her inner turmoil. Marcus worked his phone with efficient precision, arranging for hospital access, securing medical information, ensuring everything would be seamless upon their arrival. Amelia watched him, struck by the transformation. The same ruthless efficiency that had built his business empire was now directed towards supporting his mother in her distress. There was something revealing in this, how his strategic mind and vast resources could be weapons or tools, destructive or constructive depending entirely on their purpose. The private jet was a revelation to Amelia, a world of luxury she had only glimpsed in films. But there was no time to marvel at the leather seats or attentive staff. As soon as they were airborne, Marcus joined her and Eleanor, his face grave. I've spoken with David's cardiologist. He signed and spoke. He stabilized, but the situation is serious. Triple bypass surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Eleanor's hands trembled as she signed. He never mentioned heart problems. The doctor said there were warning signs David apparently ignored. Marcus translated from his conversation. Typical of your brother, he added with a faint, affectionate smile. Eleanor returned the smile weakly. He always thought himself invincible, even as children. As the flight progressed, Eleanor shared stories of her childhood with David, summers at their grandparents' lake house, David's penchant for practical jokes, his unwavering support when her hearing began to fade. Amelia translated for Marcus, though his comprehension had improved enough to catch much of it directly. They're so alike, Eleanor signed to Amelia when Marcus stepped away briefly. Both stubborn, both brilliant. That's why they butted heads when Marcus was younger. I didn't realize they were close, Amelia replied. They were, once. Eleanor's hands moved wistfully. David was Marcus's favorite uncle. He taught him to sail, to fix engines. Then business came between them, competing investments, different values. They haven't spoken in years. This revelation added another layer to the family dynamic Amelia was still learning to navigate. When Marcus returned, she observed him with new understanding, wondering what it would mean for him to face his estranged uncle in a hospital room after years of silence. When they landed in Pittsburgh, another car was waiting. The hospital was a stark contrast to the luxury they had just left. Fluorescent lights, vinyl floors, the antiseptic smell that was universal to medical facilities worldwide. At the nurse's station, Marcus's name opened doors immediately, but it was Amelia who navigated the rapid-fire medical information, her hands flying as she interpreted the doctor's update for Eleanor. The blockages are severe, she signed, but they're optimistic about the surgery. His other vital signs are strong. When they were finally allowed into David's room, Amelia held back, sensing this was a moment for family alone. Through the glass partition, she watched as Eleanor approached her brother's bed. David Whitmore was clearly Eleanor's sibling, the same dignified bone structure, the same expressive eyes, though his were now tired and surrounded by deep lines. What struck Amelia most, however, was Marcus's reaction. The composed businessman faltered at the threshold, his confident stride hesitating as he faced the frail figure of the uncle who had once taught him to sail. There was history there, complex and unresolved. Eleanor reached for her brother's hand, and David's eyes fluttered open. Recognition, then joy, spread across his features despite his weakened state. He tried to speak, but Eleanor shook her head gently, pointing to her ears with a rueful smile. Then, to Amelia's surprise, David's hands rose shakily from the blanket, forming clear if rusty signs. Still beautiful, big sister. Still bossing everyone around? Eleanor's face transformed with delight and surprise. After all these years, her brother still remembered how to sign to her. The connection between them was immediate and profound, transcending the medical equipment and years of separation. Marcus stood at the foot of the bed, watching this exchange with an expression Amelia couldn't quite read. Wonder, regret, a complex mixture of emotions that made him appear suddenly vulnerable. David's gaze shifted to his nephew and his hands formed new signs. Marcus, you got tall. A startled laugh escaped Marcus. 30 years will do that. He signed back, his movements careful but clear. You sign now? David's surprise was evident even in his weakened state. Marcus nodded, glancing briefly toward the doorway where Amelia stood. New development. Long overdue. David's eyes followed Marcus's gaze, landing on Amelia with curious interest. He signed something too quick for her to catch from a distance, but she saw Marcus flush slightly and Eleanor smile. For the next hour, Amelia remained outside, giving the family their privacy. When Marcus finally emerged, his face showed signs of emotional strain he wasn't bothering to conceal. They're catching up, he explained, running a hand through his hair in that now familiar gesture of discomposure. 30 years of silence, and suddenly they're signing like they never stopped. Your uncle still signs well, Amelia observed. He learned when my mother's hearing first started deteriorating, Marcus explained, leaning against the wall beside her. Before I was born, he was always there for her during the transition, his voice lowered. Unlike me, you're here now, Amelia reminded him gently. Marcus looked at her, his guard completely lowered. Because of you? The simplicity of the statement held more weight than any elaborate declaration could have. They stood in silence, the hospital bustle continuing around them, both aware of the shift that had occurred between them, but neither ready to address it directly. He asked about you, Marcus finally said. Your uncle? Why? Marcus's lips curved in a half smile. He wanted to know who the beautiful woman watching through the door was, and why I kept looking at her. Amelia felt heat rise to her cheeks. What did you tell him? The truth, Marcus said simply. That you're the person who taught me how to truly communicate again with my mother, with myself. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. It was Eleanor who interrupted, appearing at the doorway with exhaustion evident in her posture. David is resting now, she signed. The nurses say we should come back tomorrow, before the surgery. As they left the hospital, Amelia noticed how Marcus kept his hand at his mother's elbow, steadying her with a tenderness that would have seemed impossible from the cold, efficient man she had first met at Le Chateau. In the car, Eleanor leaned against her son's shoulder, suddenly looking every one of her 82 years. He remembered all our childhood signs, she signed faintly. The private ones we made up. After all this time, some connections can't be broken, Amelia translated softly. Just forgotten for a while. Eleanor's tired eyes moved between her son and Amelia, a knowing look that transcended her fatigue. Yes, she signed. I believe that's true. At the hotel suite Marcus had arranged, Eleanor retired immediately, the emotional toll of the day evident in her exhausted steps. Alone in the luxurious common area, Marcus poured himself a drink, then offered one to Amelia. She declined with a shake of her head. I should check on my mother, she said, reaching for her phone. Of course, Marcus nodded but didn't move away. After a pause, he added, thank you for coming, for being here for her, for all of this. In the hushed quiet of the suite, with the city lights glimmering beyond the windows, the line between employer and employee, between professional obligation and personal choice had never seemed more blurred. Where else would I be? Amelia replied honestly. Dawn broke over Pittsburgh, painting the hospital windows with pale golden light. Eleanor sat rigidly in the pre-surgery waiting room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Marcus paced near the window, his usually composed demeanor fractured by concern. Amelia sat beside Eleanor, a steadying presence as medical staff came and went, providing updates she translated with calm precision despite the technical terminology. The surgeon is one of the best in the country, Marcus signed and spoke, having made calls throughout the night to ensure his uncle received optimal care. His success rate with this procedure is exceptional. Eleanor nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on the surgical wing doors. I keep thinking about when our parents died, she signed to Amelia. David was the one who held everything together. Now I need to be strong for him, and I don't know if I can. Amelia squeezed her hand. He remembered how to sign to you after all these years. That speaks to how much you mean to him. A faint smile touched Eleanor's lip. He called me Big Sister. He hasn't called me that since we were children. As the minutes stretched into hours, Amelia observed Marcus's growing restlessness. He checked his phone frequently, not with the usual focus of a CEO managing a corporate empire, but with the nervous energy of a man seeking distraction from weightier concerns. You should eat something, Amelia suggested during the third hour. I can stay with Eleanor. Marcus hesitated, reluctant to leave, but the shadows under his eyes betrayed his exhaustion. Text me the moment there's any news. Once he had gone in search of coffee, Eleanor turned to Amelia with unexpected directness. He's falling in love with you, she signed, her expression serious. You know that, don't you? Amelia's hand stilled in her lap. Eleanor, that's not... It is. Eleanor interrupted, her signs firm and clear. I've known my son for 54 years. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Her expression softened. The question is, what do you intend to do about it? The bluntness of the question left Amelia momentarily speechless. My contract ends in 6 weeks, she finally signed, the practical reality serving as both explanation and defense. Contracts can be amended, Eleanor signed dismissively. Life is too precious and too brief for such trivial obstacles. She glanced toward the surgical doors. David and I stopped speaking for 3 years over a misunderstanding that seems laughable now. 3 years we can never recover. The wisdom in Eleanor's words resonated with Amelia. But the gulf between her world and Marcus's remained vast and intimidating. It's complicated, she signed, echoing her text to her mother. Only because you're making it so. Eleanor replied with the clarity of someone who had lived long enough to recognize unnecessary barriers when she saw them. Their conversation was interrupted by Marcus's return. He carried not only coffee but also a small paper bag from the hospital gift shop. From it, he produced a set of playing cards. I thought we might need a distraction, he explained, his signs becoming more fluid with each passing day. Mother and David used to play gin rummy for hours when I was a child. Eleanor's face softened at the thoughtful gesture. As Marcus dealt the cards, Amelia was struck by how different he was from the man she had first met at Le Chateau, the coldly efficient businessman replaced by someone capable of profound empathy and unexpected tenderness. They played several hands, the simple activity providing a much-needed diversion from the anxiety of waiting. During a reshuffling, Marcus's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression brightening. The experimental treatment for your mother's been approved, he told Amelia, signing simultaneously so Eleanor could follow. They'll begin next week. The news caught Amelia off guard that he would be thinking of her mother's needs even while his own family was in crisis. Thank you, she said softly, the words inadequate for the complexity of emotions behind them. Eleanor observed this exchange with quiet satisfaction, her knowing eyes moving between them. When the surgeon finally emerged, Amelia moved immediately to translate his update. The procedure had been successful, though David would need significant recovery time and lifestyle changes. The relief that washed over Eleanor was palpable, her shoulders relaxing, her breath releasing in a silent sigh. "When can we see him?" Marcus asked, his hand unconsciously finding his mother's. "He's in recovery now," the surgeon explained as Amelia signed. "One visitor at a time, in about an hour." When they were finally allowed into the recovery room, Eleanor went first, leaving Marcus and Amelia in the hallway. Through the window, they watched as she approached her brother's bed, her posture revealing a mixture of relief and lingering concern. "She was right," Marcus said quietly, his eyes not leaving his mother's form. "About everything." "What do you mean?" "About technology not replacing humanity. About the importance of direct communication." He turned to look at Amelia, his gaze intense. "About what matters most." The moment was interrupted by a nurse approaching with update forms. After signing them, Marcus excused himself to make several calls regarding his uncle's post-operative care. Amelia used the opportunity to check on her own mother, relieved to hear she was responding well to her new medication regimen. When Eleanor emerged from David's room, her face showed signs of emotional fatigue, but her eyes were bright. "He wants to see you," she signed to Marcus. "Alone." Marcus nodded, his expression betraying apprehension about this private conversation with the uncle he hadn't truly spoken to in years. As he entered the room, Eleanor took Amelia's arm. "Come," she signed. "Let's find some tea." They have things to resolve in the cafeteria over steaming cups of surprisingly decent tea. Eleanor shared stories of David and Marcus in happier times, sailing expeditions, mechanical projects, the natural affinity between an uncle with no children and a nephew hungry for male guidance beyond his father's more reserved presence. "What happened between them?" Amelia asked, the question that had been lingering since learning of their estrangement. Eleanor's hands moved thoughtfully. "David opposed some of Marcus's early business decisions, said he was sacrificing ethics for expansion. When Marcus's company bought and dismantled a smaller firm David had invested in, the personal became professional." She sighed. Pride kept them apart long after the actual disagreement mattered. When they returned to the recovery wing, they found Marcus sitting outside David's room, his expression contemplative. Eleanor touched his shoulder questioningly. "He's sleeping now," Marcus signed, his movements fluid with practice. "We talked, really talked, for the first time in 20 years, a smile tugged at his lips. "He still thinks I'm wrong about everything, but he's proud of me anyway." Eleanor's face brightened. "That sounds like David." She yawned suddenly, the strain of the day catching up with her. "I need to rest for a bit. I'll take you back to the hotel," Marcus offered immediately. "No." Eleanor signed firm. "You stay. Someone should be here when David wakes up." Her gaze shifted meaningfully to Amelia. "You two can manage without me for a few hours." After arranging for a car service to take Eleanor back to the hotel, Marcus and Amelia found themselves alone in the hospital corridor. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows but couldn't diminish the sense of a barrier dissolving between them. "Would you like to get some fresh air?" Marcus suggested. "There's a garden on the roof for patients and family." The rooftop garden was quiet, just a few patients in wheelchairs enjoying the sunshine with their visitors. They found an unoccupied bench overlooking the city skyline, sitting in companionable silence for several minutes. "I've been thinking about what happens when your contract ends," Marcus finally said, his voice deliberately casual despite the weight of the words. Amelia's pulse quickened. 6 weeks, she confirmed. "Yes." He turned to face her directly. "The thing is, I don't want it to end." Amelia studied Marcus's face, searching for the calculated precision she had first associated with him. Instead, she found only raw vulnerability, a man accustomed to certainty now venturing into emotional territory where his wealth and influence offered no advantage. "What are you saying exactly?" she asked, needing clarity before she could formulate a response. Marcus took a measured breath. "I'm saying that I want to explore what this is between us, without the constraints of employer and employee." His hands moved in tandem with his words, the signing now second nature. "I'm asking if you would consider staying, not as my mother's interpreter or my instructor, but as ... single quotes," he faltered, the precise vocabulary that served him in boardrooms suddenly inadequate. "As someone in my life," he finished simply. The Pittsburgh skyline stretched before them, so different from the glittering Manhattan vista they had left behind. This city of bridges seemed fitting for a conversation about crossing divides. "Our worlds are very different," Amelia said, voicing the practical concern that had been an undercurrent in her mind. "I'm a graduate student who worked as a waitress. You run a global corporation, yet here we are," Marcus countered, understanding each other better than I've understood anyone in years. He paused, his expression thoughtful. "I've spent my life building technologies to connect people across distances, but I never learned how to bridge the distance to the people closest to me. You showed me how." A breeze stirred the rooftop garden, carrying the scent of the hospital's flowering plants. In this unlikely setting, amid concerns about David's recovery and Eleanor's well-being, they were having the conversation that would define whatever came next. "I don't know what this could look like," Amelia admitted. "My mother's care, my studies, your work, ... We can figure it out," Marcus said with quiet confidence. "I'm not asking for answers today, just openness to possibility." The simplicity of the request disarmed her, not a demand or a declaration, but an invitation to explore something neither of them had anticipated when they first met at La Chateau. "I'm open to possibilities," she finally said, the words feeling both terrifying and right. The smile that transformed Marcus's face was unlike any expression she had seen from him before, unguarded light-hearted joy, free from calculation or restraint. He reached for her hand, his touch tentative despite the decisive confidence that characterized every other aspect of his life. Their quiet moment was interrupted by Marcus's phone. Eleanor was texting to check on David's condition. As they made their way back to the recovery wing, Amelia felt a curious lightness, as if acknowledging the connection between them had lifted a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying. The following days brought encouraging progress. David grew stronger, his wit returning along with his color. Eleanor split her time between the hospital and hotel, her renewed connection with her brother bringing a vibrancy to her demeanor that made her appear years younger. What struck Amelia most powerfully, however, was watching the rebuilding of the relationship between Marcus and his uncle. Years of silence were gradually giving way to cautious conversations, first about David's recovery, then business in general, and finally, tentatively, about the disagreements that had divided them. "He still thinks I'm too focused on profit," Marcus told Amelia one evening as they walked back to the hotel, "and maybe he's right to some extent, but we're finding middle ground. That's what communication is about," Amelia observed. "Not perfect agreement, but mutual understanding." Marcus nodded, absorbing this insight. "The same could be said for us," he noted, the reference to their evolving relationship no longer carefully avoided. After a week, David was stable enough for transfer to a rehabilitation facility. As they prepared to return to New York, he asked to speak with Amelia privately. "My nephew tells me you're the reason he finally learned to sign," David signed, his movements stronger each day. "That makes you something of a miracle worker in my book." Amelia smiled. He was motivated. He just needed guidance. David studied her with the same perceptive gaze Eleanor often employed. "He's different around you," he signed. "Less like William and more like John." The comparison to Marcus's father, a man she had only heard about but understood to be warm, principled, and deeply devoted to his family, felt significant. Before she could respond, David continued, "The Reed men have a history of falling for women who challenge them," he signed with a knowing smile, "who remind them that the world is more than balance sheets and business strategies." He patted her hand. "Whatever happens next, thank you for helping my sister and nephew find each other." The return flight to Manhattan carried a different energy than their urgent departure had. Eleanor dozed peacefully while Marcus worked quietly on his laptop, occasionally glancing up to catch Amelia's eye with a soft smile that spoke of their new understanding. 2 weeks later, as April blossomed across the city, Amelia's mother was discharged from the hospital following her first round of the experimental treatment. The results had exceeded everyone's expectation. Her tremors significantly reduced, her speech clearer, her movements more controlled than they had been in years. "It's not a cure, doctor," Carlin explained as Amelia and her mother sat in his office, "but it's a remarkable improvement in quality of life. The Reed Foundation's sponsorship of this protocol is making a real difference for patients like your mother." Later, in the garden of the care facility, now upgraded to one of the finest in the state, Amelia's mother studied her daughter's face with maternal intuition. "Something's different," she observed. "It's not just about my treatment." Amelia shared the developments of the past weeks, the crisis with David, the family reconciliation, and finally the evolving relationship with Marcus. Her mother listened without interruption, her eyes bright with intelligence despite her physical challenges. "Life takes unexpected turns," she said when Amelia finished. "6 months ago you were serving tables and worrying about my medical bills. Now you're considering a relationship with Marcus Reed." She reached for Amelia's hand. "Are you happy?" The question cut through all the complexities and considerations to the essential truth. "Yes," Amelia answered simply. "I am." As the 3-month contract neared its conclusion, change rippled through the Reed penthouse. Eleanor announced her decision to split her time between Manhattan and Connecticut. No longer content with the isolated existence she had accepted after her husband's death, Marcus restructured his work schedule to accommodate weekly sign language classes for his entire executive team, creating a more inclusive environment for deaf employees and clients. And Amelia found herself at another crossroads, but this time with choices expanded rather than constrained by circumstance. On her final official day, Marcus arranged a private dinner at Le Chateau, returning to where their story had begun. Eleanor insisted on joining them for the first course, her presence a deliberate statement of approval before tactfully departing to meet friends at the Symphony. As they sat across from each other at the same corner table where they had first met, Amelia couldn't help but reflect on the remarkable journey that had brought them to this moment. 3 months ago, you didn't know a single sign," she said. "Now you're nearly conversational." "I had excellent motivation," Marcus replied, his hands moving in tandem with his words, no longer mechanical but infused with the emotional expressiveness that had once seemed impossible for him. "What happens now?" Amelia asked, the question encompassing far more than her professional role. Marcus reached across the table, taking both her hands in his. "Now we write our own story," he said, "without contracts or timeline. If you're willing." Under the same lights where she had once been, just another waitress serving another wealthy patron, Amelia made her choice. In the language of signs that had built a bridge between worlds, she gave her answer, her hands speaking directly to his heart in the silent eloquence that had transformed them all.